Fascism was not started by the Germans, nor was it started in Eastern Europe, though this might be the more popular examples you think of first. It was started by Benito Mussolini and the Italians in the lead up to World War II, and thankfully a lot of the primary documents from the formation of this ideology have been preserved that we can review today, and I've gone through some of them. One of the secondary documents that I think is truly vital to understanding this ideology in its completeness is the autobiography of Benito Mussolini. This was dictated, no pun intended, and captured so that we can get a glimpse of the man himself. And not just a glimpse of the man himself, but also a bit of what fascism is, but also how he managed to achieve what he did at the time that he did. In short, before I get to my longer points, he appealed to rich national history and identity via personal examples in a masculine way. He absolutely called back to the Romans, to the Roman Empire, to masculinity, to men being men and women being women, of conquest, of power, and of order. He called back to all of those things in very poetic ways. And to a people screaming for identity, for unity, purpose, and strength, he hit the nail on the head in more ways than one. What he calls to, of course, isn't inherently bad. In fact, I think a lot of it is generally good, and we could do with a lot more of it today. This just, like I said, shows us a bit of how he did what he did, regardless of the outcomes. Now, I guess this might be a good time for the obligatory YouTube disclaimer, because yes, this is going on YouTube and Rumble. Check me out there too, I suppose. I'm not a fascist, nor do I think that you should be a fascist. The ideology objectively removes God from life. He does call to God, but that doesn't mean that the ideology is inherently Christian. It replaces God with the state. So on that alone, the results of fascist regimes in history aside, that alone, you shouldn't be a fascist. But it's an ideology that I think we should seek to understand. Also, throughout this, don't forget to do the algorithm stuff, but also check the links that I have to my books and that I write down below. But Benito Mussolini was a journalist first before he was in the military and politics, and of course, before he was the leader of Italy. And he held on to his outlet the entire time. He never stopped being involved in journalism, and it's clear that he had a way with words. It's also not lost on me as I read this, as I read this, and as I'm talking to you about this now. He was a journalist and a politician, so of course it's going to be poetic. I'm not taking every single thing that he writes in here at face value, so don't think that I am. It's just what he says and how he says it clearly had an impact. He didn't exactly fail his way to the top, so it's not lost on me that this might be exaggeration, but it's good to understand it. So the first one comes on page 21 of this book. All that I have read and am reading is only a picture that is unfolded before my eyes without giving me an impression strong enough to make an incision in me. I draw out only the cardinal points that give me, above all, and first of all, the necessary elements for the comparison of the essence of the different nations. I am desperately Italian. I believe in the function of Latinity. I came to these conclusions after a thorough and critical study of the German, Anglo-Saxon, and Slavonic history, and that of the world. Nor have I, for obvious reasons, neglected the history of the other continents. So he's putting pretty concisely here that he's a well-studied man, that he's curious about other cultures, that he does seek to understand other people, and yet of all of his studies, where no matter where he goes in the world, no matter what he sees and reads and experiences throughout the world, he always comes back to his homeland. He comes back to this desperate Italian being that he has, this deep nationalism and pride in his country and his people that he has. And that's something that I don't see that we have a lot in Western politics today. Some of it's kind of coming back, but we don't have the people. We've been afraid to be proud of ourselves, to be proud of our country, and to have a clear identity as a nation, whether it's America, whether it's Europe, whether it's Britain rather, or Germany. We've been beaten into this sense of being ashamed of ourselves for so long, and it's something that needs to be broken if we want to see ourselves survive past this century, I think. And this is something that he, like I said, he is desperately Italian, believing in the function of Latinity, that no matter where he goes in the world, no matter what he sees, he always comes back to, oh my God, I am my own people. That he identifies with his own people, with his own country, and he puts that out into the world too. And it's shameless and it's great. And it's something I think that we could do with more of genuinely today in our politics. The next one on 44. This one coming after World War I. And Italy did not appreciate the outcome of World War I. Victory, however, warmed our hearts and our souls. It exalted Italians and spurred them to higher work, honoring the dead as well as the living. From October to December 1918, Italy seemed like a factory working in full blast in complete accord with progress. War had left, beyond its inevitable griefs, a deep poetical vein in our national life. No one sensed it better. No one seemed more a part of it than I. It was in this great national moment, it was in this great historical moment immediately after a victory achieved with untold hardship that our young nation, younger as a nation than America, with traditions not yet seasoned by age, in spite of having thrown into the glowing brazier of the conflict men and wealth, was treacherously deceived. Its fundamental trustfulness was played upon in the making of the Treaty of Versailles. Again, poetic, and that no one saw it more or better than him. So again, humble, I know. But he's clearly identifying with the hardship, with the fervor that came out of the Italians after World War I, and then the hardship that they saw and the, not deceit, but the deception that they felt after World War I. They called it they called it collectively the mutilated victory, because they went into World War I with an idea that they were going to get something at the end of it, that it was going to be worthwhile. And then after World War I, they felt so deceived, they felt shirked. And now, admittedly, they didn't do as much as, they weren't as effective as maybe they should have been to get what they felt was warranted, but that's besides the point. They felt that they deserved it. They felt that they had earned that. They felt that the sacrifice was going to be worth it, and then whenever they got to the other side of it, they felt so deceived, and he was calling to that they had put all of this blood, sweat, and treasure, these lives and treasure, into the meat grinder of World War I, and they came out on the other end of it only to be shortchanged by who they saw to be their allies at the Treaty of Versailles, on a similar side as Germany. And he did not like that. Italians did not like that. So, stirring something up about that, being poetic about his nation, about his people being shirked like that, being shortchanged, identifying that hurt and that pain, and pointing to other people, putting a name, a face on the source of that discomfort, of that hurt. Again, we could do more. We could do with more of that today, I think. Not much later, on page 50, this was as communism started coming about in Italy in earnest. Now, side note, Benito Mussolini started as a socialist in Italy, but pretty early on in his political life, he moved over to fascism because he saw what the socialists were about, and he disagreed with it fundamentally, deeply. So then he moved over to fascism with people like Giovanni Gentile. Naturally enough, the revolutionists, observing their effect, puffed up with a new braggart triumph. Not a single force, interventista or any other, set foot in the street to stop the irresponsibles. The beloved tricolor flag of Italy was taken as a mark. It was hastily taken off balconies. I remember an episode in The Shame of Those Days. A woman, a school teacher in the popular quarters, ran to the defense of the Italian flag. Risking her life, she stood with blazing eyes against a herd of communists. You may be sure that in the period of redemption and resurrection, when we stood upright again, the Golden Medal of Valor was bestowed on this woman of saintly courage. Now, I haven't been able to find, I did a little bit of looking, so not a lot, admittedly, but I wasn't able to find the identity of this woman or that this ever happened. But still, he's calling to something. He's using his words to identify something that the communists were going through, that they were tearing up Italy, that they were using the Italian flag, the flag of their country, as a mark for reprisal, as a mark for violence, for outrage. So people were taking down the symbol of their nation, and that's something that he found deeply disgraceful and painful to see happen in his country. And we can see that today in places like California, in New York City, in probably in parts of Washington and stuff too. I mean, think of the BLM riots, for God's sake. If you weren't of the right identity and outward enough with it, and certainly with other political ideologies and outrages happening that have happened recently in America, you can see a lot of the same effect. And frankly, in my opinion, it's from a lot of the same people. But he saw that happening and he thought it was deeply disgraceful. And not only did he identify that, and not only did he again put a face to the source of the pain, to the source of the outrage, he identified clearly, at least somewhat clearly, somebody doing something about it. Somebody from, like, a commoner, I guess, just your average everyday woman in this case, defending the symbol of the nation, that everyday patriotism and that courage to do something about it. He, again, maybe I'm going to keep looking and see if I can find this lady, see if I can substantiate this. Like I said, I didn't do much looking, but even just saying that, yep, that is a good thing. Not only have I noticed that, it's a good thing, and it is to be awarded whenever that happens. That is a good thing. You should want to, our leaders should seek to inspire that level of courage, that level of pride in our country, in our people, that they should want us to defend the flag. We shouldn't have it be such that we could be in a similar position today with people, with roving bands of whoever going around and burning down businesses, burning down our flags, stomping on them in the street, foreigners coming into our country and waving foreign flags, speaking foreign languages, and organizing in our streets to protest our government. That should simply not be allowed. And he certainly shared that belief, and also called it out as a good thing when your average person did something about it. Not much later, on 54, he didn't just call out, and he didn't just identify with pride and fervor when the everyman did that. He also, of course, loved his military too. The Italian Arditi on page 54 were a creation of the war. The idea, born in Garibaldi's impetuous fighting vigor and dash, and finds its remote origin in the heroic city militias that flourished in many parts of Italy at the happy time of the townships, the communes. The Arditi rendered first-class service during the war. They were our troops of assault of the first rush. They threw themselves into the battle with bombs in hands and daggers in teeth, with supreme contempt for death, singing their magnificent war hymns. There was in them not only the sense of heroism, but an indomitable will. Now, the Arditi were, he lays it out pretty clearly there, but he's not kidding. They were basically Italian trench raiders that ran over into enemy trenches armed with nothing but knives and grenades. It was wild. I'm sure the casualty rate was ridiculously high and understated even today, but they were, that was a troop that they had in Italy in World War I. I'm not sure about World War II off the top of my head at this moment, but again, he's not just proud of your average person doing something about it. He's not just proud of his country. He's again making a specific example, and this time putting a face to something that is good, something that should be aspired to, something that should inspire the courage and fervor for his people. And he's calling that out directly in the Arditi. Now, of course, we see that in modern politics today. People will make some kind of claim to the military. We'll say that we have the strongest or the best, but rarely, in my view, do we see specific examples of truly effective military prowess. We see specific examples like what we did in Venezuela, what we did in Iran. We see small-scale specific examples, and granted, I would not like to see a large-scale war because that just means a lot of destruction and death. War is hell, and I don't like that. But if we're going to have the world's largest military, and obviously I'm speaking as an American today, we should see specific examples, I think, of the effectiveness of these troops, of our troops. Not just in combat, but also in training. We should see specific, clear, undeniable examples of these are our guys, don't mess with them. The Arditi certainly had some effect on the enemy. Whether or not they made it very far, being armed with only grenades and knives, trenches were really close quarters, so they certainly had some effect, if not physically, then definitely psychologically as well. And he called that out. We certainly have we have not the same troops like that, but we have similarly shocking troops today. Call that out, I think. And not just America and the West broadly. You should not just want a strong and courageous people, morally and physically and all that, and spiritually, but you should also want that of your military so that you can make that example to other countries. And I think we could do very well with more specific examples of that from our military today. Now, the first half is where he's spending a lot. He spends maybe a chapter or two speaking about his personal history before he gets into politics and before he gets into the military and all that, before he gets into national life or public life, I guess. Most of this book is his public life, almost all of it. The first half, roughly, is him talking about other people. And of course, he does talk about other people. He involves others throughout the book, obviously. But the second half, I would say, is when he starts speaking more and more of himself personally. So later on 152, jumping ahead about 100 pages, he doesn't just point to examples of other people that should be replicated, of other things, of the function of latinity of his military, of his average person, of the colors of his country. He makes examples of himself. And here on 152, I love all sports. I drive a motor car with confidence. I have done tours at great speed, amazing not only to my friends, but also to old and experienced drivers. I love the airplane. I have flown countless times. Even when I was kept busy by the cares of power, I needed only a few lessons to obtain a pilot's license. I once fell from a height of 50 meters, but that did not stop my flying. Motors give me a new and great sensation of strength. A horseback ride on a magnificent sorrel is also for me a joyous interruption, and fencing, to which I devote myself often with remarkable physical benefit, gives me the greatest satisfaction. I ask of my violin nothing more than serene hours of music, of the great poets such as Dante, of the supreme philosophers such as Plato. I often ask hours of poetry, hours of meditation. No other amusement interests me. I do not drink, I do not smoke, and I am not interested in cards or games. I pity those who lose time, money, and sometimes all of life itself in the frenzy of games. I've not done much, this is my reference for the personal and public life largely of Benito Mussolini. So I can frankly only take him at his word, and again, see in the beginning, it's not lost on me that he was a journalist and a politician. But he does make an example here, yet again, a very positive example, that he is a strong man with varied interests and self-discipline. He can control himself to not get lost into his vices. He says here he doesn't even waste time or money on vices, that he is solely dedicated to productive or beneficial, positive leisure, like horseback riding, like fencing, like physical activity, like motorsport, like flying, like intellectual discovery, looking to poets and philosophers. Again, all things that we assume that our politicians, having gone to our higher institutions, having gone to our higher learning institutions and being where they're at, at least but so maybe I'm just speaking for myself here, I hope that most of them are pretty well-read and disciplined people, that they do explore things like Plato, they do explore things like history generally, but also specifically. But I also know well enough that they don't, that it is not, that the ideal that I have in my mind for politicians is so far from even almost being met. It's laughable. It's pathetic, frankly. With the current state of our politics and of our politicians is abysmal. And it is not, if we keep doing what we're doing, we do not have the people in charge at the helm for long-term prosperity. We haven't for decades, and we're in a bad spot largely because of our politicians, but I digress. The point here is the example that he's making of himself, the example that he's making of men in public life, of politicians, of men, of Italian men, is a really strong and good thing. It is something to be sought after, that you should want to spend your time on good, productive things, on getting out into the world and having new experiences, on being a varied man, so you're not just some dull lump on a log that just can't wait for his next drink or the next gamble or something. He's giving a positive, strong example to men in Italy, to Italian men, and frankly, to men around the world. A lot more guys today could do with following the example of go do stuff. 192. The next one, again, this is my frame of reference. I take him at his word. I want to do more looking into how the actual government of fascist Italy function and whether all of these, or any of these, much of this rather, can be substantiated. But he, again, after World War I and the mutilated victory, he came into a very poor Italy, a very put upon Italy. It was not in a good spot. I don't know what the conversion rate is, and I'll put it on the screen. I really should have done looking into this before I made the video, but 6 billion lira, whatever the currency would convert to, 6 billion lira in debt, of national debt in the 1920s. Billion? With a B. That sounds heinous. Admittedly, I assume it kind of pales in comparison to, what, 39 trillion, but that still sounds pretty bad. There were many demands due to waiting. Necessity had turned the printing presses to the production of new paper money, driving down and down the value of Italian currency. An irresponsible and demagogic policy had been followed, which had brought about complex makeshifts. These not only affected the soundness of the budget, but also were undermining all our economic life and the whole efficiency of the state. I had to deal a smashing blow to useless expenditures and to those who sought tribute from the treasury. I had to rake up tax slackers. I had to establish severest economy in every branch of state administration. I had to put a brake on the endless increase of employees. Furthermore, the obligation of settling our debts to foreign powers was staring me in the face. Even if our resources were limited, this supreme act of wisdom and honesty had to be performed. Cut your shit and pay your debts. That's what he's putting forth here. And again, if I could substantiate half of that, oh dear God, give me that today. Again, speaking as an American, nearing $40 trillion in debt, that's laughable. And the effect that fiat currency has, that it's backed only by the full faith and confidence, frankly, of the United States military. Yeah, we're a powerhouse. Eventually, somebody's going to cash that in. And even if, it's only a small percentage of foreign interests that have bought our debt, I don't care. We shouldn't be in debt to foreign countries, and we shouldn't have a $38 trillion debt to ourselves then. That's stupid. He's, again, the example that he's putting forth here, substantiated or not, do this one, please. That basic fiscal responsibility that he put upon his government employees, that he put upon his administration, that not just one branch or whatever, the whole of Italian administration, the whole of the economy was working for the benefit of Italy. We certainly do not have that in place today in America. We have not had that place today in America, and we have not had that in place in the years past in the West broadly. Our economies don't work for ourselves, and he's making it very clear here that the Italian economy of 1920 and the Italian administration and its fiscal responsibility should be working for the betterment of the Italian people. We don't have that today. My God, we should have that today. And this last one here, because this video is getting way longer than I ever had cared to, on 232, nearing basically the end. In his political and social doctrine of fascism that I believe he himself wrote, because I guess as another aside, the origins and doctrine of fascism was actually written by Giovanni Gentile. He was basically the primary philosopher behind fascism. Julius Evola came up a little bit later. I said in a prior video that Julius Evola was kind of a contemporary to them, and he certainly was. But I don't think he was I don't think he had the effect or pull that I originally stated that he had. He was definitely a philosopher on behalf of fascism, and he had, I went over one of his works, and I think he has a lot of good points and great ideas about fascism, about administration broadly, frankly, but it's certainly under the lens of fascism being his background. But Benito Mussolini, while credited, while the public face of fascism, wasn't actually the philosopher. He was more, I don't want to say the mouthpiece, but I guess kind of the mouthpiece of fascism. Anyway, in his political and social doctrine of fascism, here again, fascism repudiates the conception of economic happiness to be realized by socialism and, as it were, at a given moment in economic evolution to assure everyone the maximum of well-being. Fascism denies the materialist conception of happiness as a possibility and abandons it to its inventors, the economists of the first half of the 19th century. That is to say, fascism denies the validity of the equation well-being equals happiness, which would reduce men to the level of animals caring for one thing only, to be fat and well-fed, and would thus degrade humanity to a purely physical existence. There is more to life, there's more to the world than materialism, and that is what him and the other fascists that I have read have been saying reliably, that it is not, we do not have simply a material existence, it is also a spiritual existence. You do have a soul. They say it comes from the state. I say your soul comes from God, and you should seek the higher meaning in God, not the state. But they do have a good point that as a national identity, as a cohesive national identity, that knowing what your people are, that comes from the state. And that is also affirmed by Christianity, that God recognizes nations, recognizes different peoples. Fascists certainly do too. The source of those peoples, again, as I keep saying, are different, certainly, but nonetheless, for your nation, for your people, and for yourself, the fascists say, you are meant for something more. There's something bigger than yourself that you should be working for. It is not simply to be fat and well-fed. It is not simply a material well-being that you're seeking after. It is the well-being of your neighbor, of your fellow countrymen, of your family, of your nation. And again, yet again, we need more of that deeply in such a profound way, I think, because again, as I've been saying, our politics, our current way of life, the current Western way of life is that of suicidal empathy and self-destructive pity, grief. We're taught from a young age to basically hate ourselves, to be identified from the outside, and it's terrible for us. It has been chipping away at our own national identity for decades, and it's led to people like me. I look at myself as, frankly, a patriot, as a nationalist, and yet I've come to realize I can't really identify what my people are. Is it liberal democracy and the universality of everything? Is it the fact? Because that's what it seems to me today. That's what the Western life. That's what Western life seems to me today. It seems to be political suicide at every facet, whether it's financial, whether it's by identity, whether it's by power, by military, by business, everything. It's just. It's like we have to hate ourselves, and we can't identify that we are a people, and we can only identify that other people are peoples, and that should be kept alive and made to prosper by whatever means necessary. But don't do that for yourself. It's backwards. It's completely backwards. And of course, the individual soul of men and women today has been so rotted from the inside, taught from a young age that you're supposed to hate yourself, that you're supposed to go against nature and things that are just that are good for you because modernity says so, as though we've evolved past God. Now, these guys would probably be saying that we've evolved past the state. At least that's what the modern claim, I imagine, would be from fascists, and they would say, no, we need to get back to the strong state. Again, as I said in the very beginning, I'm not a fascist. You shouldn't be. We certainly diverge. But it's one of the other very good things that I think that the fascists talked about, that there is so much more to life than materialism. I think you know that, and you should seek that out. Seek that out in the Lord, not in the state, but seek it out, please. This has gone on so much longer than I thought. But thank you, especially if you've made it this far. Again, do the algorithm stuff. That does help. I have links to this book on Amazon. It's not an affiliate, but I personally write books too. You can find a link to that too down below. Thank you again. Comment if you agreed, if you disagreed, if you liked my ramblings at all. Cool. Thank you. Thanks. I hope I'll see you in the next one.